Anthropologists need not only to learn a language, they need to be able to describe how people use that language in enough detail that they can understand communicative competence and become competent users and speakers of the language themselves. We see this very clearly in the readings for this week. How one orders a drink in Subanun determines one's masculinity, one's social status, and one's changing political alliances and resources over time and across generations. How one orders a drink at Brady's bar is also a ritual of masculinity, one in which teasing women waitresses in front of one's male companions is part of homosocial bonding between men. Part of the communicative competence it takes to order a drink is always about how we can participate in this manly ritual, a ritual that allows us to express our masculinity in particular cultural contexts. Okay, a couple of key concepts. The first one is linguistic relativity, very similar to the concept of cultural relativity we've already discussed. Linguistic relativity has to do with how all languages and ways of speaking have to be understood on their own terms in their own cultural context. All languages are equally well developed. There are no primitive or simple languages. As we gathered more and more data on language we thought were going to be primitive, in the 1910s and 1920s, we discovered that each had a sophisticated grammar and a number of extraordinary capacities for expressing ideas that did not exist in the European languages with which scholars were most familiar. We learned that in order to study languages properly, we need to step away from our own preconceived ideas about how languages work, how language sounds, and how language operates in a given context or situation. We need to get rid of all these notions that we have as competent speakers in our own speech community, and we must go with an open mind as much as we can to the communities we study. In doing so, we open up the possibility that we can develop, or at least understand, communicative competence in the new language community. What do we mean then by communicative competence? Communicative competence refers to the sociocultural ground rules you need to learn in order to understand how a given language works and to operate as a linguistically competent member of a community. If you have communicative competence, you can use ways of speaking that go far beyond knowing words, grammar, syntax, and structure. You'll be able to use language to accomplish various things, such as to make someone laugh, or go out on a date with you, or allay someone's fears, or to get someone to trust you. You'll know how to use the language to accomplish those goals. Communicative competence necessitates an understanding that speaking appropriately involves far more than grammar and lexicon, and to understand it and analyze it, you need an ethnography of speaking, a specification of what kinds of things to say in what kinds of message forms to what kinds of people in what kinds of situations. That's a direct quote from Charles Frake, who wrote the article How to Ask for a Drink in Subanen, included in this week's readings. At the core is the notion of the speech event, which is any defined activity in which talk plays a central role. So obviously the article How to Ask for a Drink in Subanen described a speech event of drinking in Subanen. And How to Ask for a Drink at Brady's Bar described a speech event at Brady's Bar in the 1970s in the United States. How do we analyze speech events? Frake actually gives us a formula. We begin by defining the event. We then define the community in which the event takes place. We continue on to define both the physical and the cultural situation. In other words, what is the physical or spatial setting? A home, church, school, the street, a store, the workplace, and also, how do people define the situation culturally? We also describe the speech event itself. Who says what to whom in which circumstances, and with what kinds of outcomes in what order. We describe the speech styles. How do participants speak to one another, and what kinds of effects do those have, and why do they use the styles they use? And from all of this, we try to extract the rules of speaking that are guiding them, even if the speakers themselves cannot explain what those rules are. Speech events are divided up into a number of speech acts. A speech act is a term for any kind of language unit that's used to accomplish a purpose: to insult, to gather information, to persuade, to greet, to curse, to amuse, to communicate. Speech acts can be a word, a sentence, a phrase, or even an entire book, any unit that is used to accomplish a purpose. Sometimes speech acts are called ways of speaking. So let's take Brady's Bar, where we encountered a large number of speech acts. People were using speech for shaming, talking, giving shit, sweet-talking, swearing, bitching, lying, flirting, greeting, arguing, apologizing, bullshitting, hassling, babbling, joking, teasing, and so on. There was just a lot going on. In order to record all of this, anthropologists have developed a series of tools, one of the most famous of which is the speaking mnemonic from Delheim's Articulation of How to Do an Ethnography of Communication. Heim set up a series of things that he felt anthropologists should pay attention to when describing speech events and speech acts. These include setting, participants, ends, act sequence, keys, instrumentalities, norms, and genres. By setting, he meant a description of the specific time and place, while scene refers to the cultural definition of the place, so also what Frake would say. Participants. Who's speaking? What kinds of audiences are there? Do the speakers in the audience take turns, as in a drink gathering in Subanen, or is one person speaking more and the other person or persons acting as an audience? Ends. What are the purposes or goals or outcomes of the speech act and speech events? The act sequence. What is the form and order of the acts that make up the speech event? Keys refers to the tone, manner, or spirit of the speech act. Instrumentalities refers to the channels, forms, and styles of speech that are being used. Norms refer to the social rules that govern the event and the reactions of the participants to the speech acts that take place. And finally, genre refers to the type of speech acts that occur in the event, as well as the types of events themselves. The point of this mnemonic, speaking, is not to have a checklist. It's to have ideas in your head when you go into the field to help you describe everything. Only by having detailed description are we able to determine contexts and meanings and go beyond simply recording what was said.